So this presentation is part of a larger series I've been doing on exploring skills management. And you can see other things on my LinkedIn page, some of the other stuff I've written, as well as there's links to a YouTube channel where I recorded some of these. But today I'm going to be talking about the emerging role of two new features, skills engines and skills content solutions. And I always like to start prefacing this before I get into the technology about why. Why is this technology being created? Well, first of all, skills management is not new. It's been around a long time. This picture is from like 300 BC in the Chinese Empire, where they were systematically assessing people's skills to see if they could perform different jobs. That's what skills management is basically about, making sure people have the skills and capabilities needed to perform the work that we're asking them to do. Now, what is happening, though, that over the last 20 years, and it's been a steady shift, there's been two things that are driving greater focus on needing to get better at skills management. And I talk a lot about this in a book I wrote called Talent Tectonics. And I refer to these sort of as talent tectonic shifts, like the tectonic forces, that change the nature of the planet. There's talent tectonics that change the nature of work and labor markets. And the two big forces are, one, digitalization. The digitalization of everything is creating the demand for new skills. It's making other skills become obsolete. It's doing this faster and faster and faster. At the same time, demographic shifts, mainly that we're having more people are aging out of our labor markets and aging into them in a lot of parts of the world, is creating a real shortage of people with skills from sort of the traditional places we might have gotten them from. And I want to stress something. The problem is not that we don't have enough people. The problem is we don't have enough people with the skills that we need. And so I always get frustrated when people say declining birth rates are bad for economies. They're not. They're bad for economies that historically exploited large numbers of underemployed people. We have enough people in society to perform the jobs we need. We just need to get a lot better at finding people with the right skills, or finding people with the potential to develop those right skills and helping them build those skills. So these two forces are creating a lot of pressure on companies to get much better at skills management. Now, somebody once told me that technology is created right when you need it. And to some degree, this has really kind of been true with skills management, that one of the big things advent in technology advancement that happened over the last few years is something called skills management ontologies, or skills ontologies. Now, the concept of skills ontologies is not new. I actually built one in like 2003, but it was very difficult to build these things before we had access to all the data we have on the web now and the super fast computing speeds we have now. So we had, the concept was around, but we couldn't do it well. So what exactly is a skills ontology, and how is it different from what we used to do? Well, we used to manage skills, and to some degree we always will manage skills using what are called skills taxonomies, that were sort of hierarchical structures of skills. So for example, you might, in a skills taxonomy, you might say, we've got programming skills. Under programming skills, we have different kinds of computer programming, like Java programming or SAS programming. And we also have math skills. And under math, we've got statistics and algebra. And that's kind of a useful way to organize skills, but it doesn't actually reflect the way we think about skills in real life. Because we know that there are connections between different skills that go beyond sort of these rigid hierarchies. And a good example would be in this example I provided here. SAS, if you know what it is statistical programming language. So if somebody has SAS skills, they invariably also have statistical skills, because you couldn't really use SAS if you didn't have statistical skills. Also, if you wanted to teach somebody SAS, if they had statistical skills already, it'd be a lot easier to teach them that. So what an ontology does is it finds these links beyond the hierarchy to how these different things are tied together. And it's a lot more the way we think about skills in ourselves. We think of skills in terms of like they're tied to lots of different things. We don't sort of think of them in these rigid hierarchies. And so over the last few years, thanks to the generative AI and natural language processing and machine learning and all that stuff you hear about, we're able to build these ontologies much faster, much more effectively than we have in the past. And this has led to an explosion of focus on skills management. But what a lot of companies realize is sort of rush to implement these ontologies is just because we can build these ontologies doesn't mean they're necessarily easy to build, and doesn't mean they're also easy to apply. What companies have realized as they get in is that skills management, it's a lot more than building ontologies. It actually requires coordinating multiple complex activities, starting with intelligence, which is understanding what skills matter, and that's where the ontologies have a lot of help. But then you've got to describe them. How are we going to describe people based on these skills? How are we going to maybe validate whether or not people actually have the skills? So they may say they have it, but we test to say what's their proficiency. matching people to careers and jobs, confirming them for certain roles where it's really important that we test skills before they're allowed, for example, to operate a type of machinery or something like that, developing skills. So I'm not going to go through all of these. And actually, there's an article I wrote on LinkedIn called Skills Management Technology Solution Landscape that goes through all these. But if you look at them, there's multiple things that are going on in order for skills to work. And you could build one of these, but the other one wouldn't necessarily be effective. You've got to manage all of them to truly do skills management well. And that's gets really complicated. And one of the things that companies that have really dove into this quickly realized is that the foundation for all of this stuff is skills intelligence. If we don't have a good take on what are the skills that we need, it's hard to do any of the other stuff. But it is very difficult to build good skills content. I know companies that have focused on it for like years to build it. And so this has led to two new things being created. And it's interesting how this evolved. Two new solutions over the last 3 years have emerged. And I refer to them as skills engines, which are really more of a feature, and skills content solutions that are true standalone solutions. And I use the analogy of these between building engines of a car and refining fuel to power that car. Most of the major, probably all actually, of the major HR platforms now have something that I call a skills engine. It's basically a repository. I liken it to a fuel tank where you can put skills data and it'll take that skills data and it'll feed it out to all the different operational activities. You can feed it to recruiting, you can feed it to learning, you can feed it to compensation, workforce planning. But it all depends on having good fuel in that tank to fuel it out. Now, a lot of those companies initially still provide some level of fuel, but what they found it's not very good because the capabilities that go into building the engine, that is taking skills data and applying it for recruiting and development, are very different from the capabilities for actually identifying the skills. It's sort of like there's a difference between building engines and refining fuel. And it's very complicated to figure out how to identify the right skills, manage the skills, organize those skills, and that's led to an emergence of a whole other category called skills content solutions. And what these skills content solutions do is they feed fuel, if you will, into these skills engines. So how they work is there's massive sources of skills data out there. And I mean, it's sort of overwhelming, all the different places that companies can go and they can kind of grab data and use it to build these skills ontologies. It can be government reports, job postings, resumes, job descriptions, org charts, employee profiles, training materials. I kind of throw in the kitchen sink. There's all these different places that you can go and pull data in to kind of refine that gas in a skills content engine. Then that gas gets fueled into the engine, and then from that engine takes that skills content and puts it out into all these different workforce actions, planning, recruiting, development, things like that. So what's interesting about skills content solutions, though, is they're very different kinds. Just as there's a difference between, diesel fuel and high octane racing fuel and unleaded fuel for the car, there's also different kinds of skills content. And it is really based on the focus of the company that built it. Because when you look at skills content providers, they started with a certain angle to building skills content. There's some that started by analyzing labor markets. And really the question they were looking at is what skills are companies seeking, where they found in the labor market, like job postings, candidate applications, government reports, things like that. There's other ones that focus on internal workforce. What are the skills that people in the workforce have now by looking at employee communication, work projects, project plans, internal emails, things like that, where they extract information. There's other ones that really came from a learning training background. They said, well, what are the courses people are taking? What are the courses that are available? And based on what people are trying to learn or we're trying to teach, what are the skills that are important? There's also staffing ones. Some of the most well-known skills ontologies actually started with staffing. It's a very clear problem. We're trying to match candidate resumes to job descriptions through more sophisticated analysis of skills at a deeper level. There's also proficiency ones, and these tend to be the most specialized. They tend to be very industry focused, where what they're focused on is how can we determine the level of proficiency somebody has a skill? So somebody might say, hey, I'm a Java programmer, but how good a Java programmer are you? And they use different techniques to assess different levels of skills capability. What is the difference between competent and expert on different skills? And they tend to focus very specifically on industries because it's a real deep dive into different natures of skills. And the last one, which has really emerged as the platform companies have come out with skills engines, is content that is designed just for that platform. It says, what content can we put in that will allow somebody to turn that skills engine on and get up and running, given and works well in that platform? And those are interesting because they're very pragmatically focused on. They're really designed to give companies a starting point to work with skills, as opposed to like this deep dive into these other types of skills. Now, the thing is, you can use all these, you can mix and match them depending on your skills engine. Which ones make sense are going to depend on the needs of your company, industries, all sorts of different things. But I think what's important is there are so many of these things out here, it's probably worth looking at them. I mean, I doubt any company is going to need all of them right away, but there's probably at least one out there that would really help address some problem that you're dealing with. So it's definitely worth looking at because it's a really neat kind of fast growing emerging area of technology. So in sum, I hope you found this little overview of this two new type of skills, content solutions, and skills engines useful and interesting. I like to end with a closing thought from my book, Talent Tectonics, kind of getting back to the reason why I do this, which is I believe that better work environments create better world environments. And when we look at this skills issue, I think it's really important that we don't have a shortage of people. We have a shortage of people with the skills we need. Skills shortages are a threat, not just to companies, but our society, if we can't help people acquire and adapt to get the skills they need to thrive in a digitalized world. But skill shortages are an opportunity for us to rethink how we manage the workforce so we can help people develop these new skills, make jobs and careers more of an ongoing process of self-development and discovery, building new skills throughout our lifetime. And by the way, that isn't just good for companies, that's the type of work that actually creates happy and prosperous societies. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to learn more, you can check me out on LinkedIn. Here's a couple of the other articles, and I will be releasing more things on this as I go along. But with that, I hope you enjoyed it, and please leave a comment or give me some feedback. I always like getting ideas, questions, or at least know maybe somebody out there is listening. All right, thanks. Bye.